Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. Here, this is the spot where the conversation is pointed, the guests are sharp, and the responses are never dull. Welcome home, Brains. There's only one requirement to hang out on the edge, is that you open your big brain and close your small mind. Did you bring your thinking caps? It's time to put them on, because the conversation starts now. Sweetest ever. Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. This is the spot, the place, the location where we give you unconditional love. This is a place where the conversations are really pointed, the guests are super sharp, and the responses are never dull. We're going back to the land down under with Dr. Ann Butcher. She is a woman that has spent her life working with people to overcome trauma. She's worked with women in domestic violence, abuse situations, sexual assault. She's also a life mindset coach and a therapy counselor. I'm going to ask her about some things that's going on in the world down there in Australia. I'm sure she's going to be very forthright and honest, but also things that we can encapsulate in our hearts and our minds to deal with the trauma. I don't know. I'm one of those believers that I don't think people ever get over it. I think they learn how to cope and deal with it. So she's the expert, and we'll talk to her more about that in just a moment. How are you, Dr. Ann?
I'm really well, April. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast
Oh,
today.
so glad to have you. I love to talk to trauma recovery specialists because everybody's been traumatized. We were just talking about the loss of my dog, and I'm still, you know, and it's the little things. I was in my morning meditation the other day, and the message that kept resonating with me is the little things. It's the little things that, we suppress, that we hold back, and it just keeps us buried. In your line of work and expertise, do you see that people ever get over trauma, or is, like I said, they learn to really cope and deal with it? What's the real deal?
Yeah, look, the answer is that people can learn to live with it. So you can't really ever change the past. The past is the past, but you can learn to live with it, and you can learn to not allow it to continue to have an effect on your life. Um, so yes, you can. I do see so many people who are stuck in trauma from their life, their years of growing up, adolescence, all that, just the things that have happened in their life. But I also see other people who can work their way through that. Often takes therapy, often takes assistance from someone who really knows how to help you work your way through that. But the good news is that it is possible, which is, yeah, gives hope.
How did you find yourself in this space? Tell us a little bit about your history. Why did you choose this kind of, this type of work?
Yeah, so leading me to this type of work was really based on a really traumatic experience that I had during my adolescence. So, if we cast our mind back into the 70s, when I was a teenager, was in high school, and I had a teenage pregnancy, and that was hugely traumatic for my family. And back in those days, um, girls were it was the options were, if you found yourself in that situation, were to either you know have some girls got married at like 15, 16, like
Well, I know
uh,
to their cousins.
oh yeah, like so shotgun weddings, and the other option was really adoption. And so for me, my parents decided that that's what would happen, that I was sent away to a place where I had an aunt who lived there, but there was no one else I knew there. And I didn't live with my aunt because it was a big family secret. So I
Oh
had to be kind,
gosh.
I had to be kind of, you know, I lived with someone who I'd never met before, who ended up being a lovely elderly couple who took me in and were just wonderful. Thankfully, I'm very thankful for that. But anyway, the long story short is that I was 15, and I was told that I'd ruined my life and that my life was over. And to me, that was inconceivable because my life hadn't even begun.
Right.
And so it gave me the determination to prove everyone wrong. No, my life wasn't over. And that is the title of my first book, my memoir. That it's called "I Ruined My Life," or so they said, because
Mm.
it's just a demonstration of how I wasn't never going to let that actually be my life story, and it propelled me on to do things that I never probably would have done otherwise. So I was determined to complete my leaving certificate for school, which I did by correspondence that year that I was pregnant, and I did complete my schooling and complete my leaving, got my leaving certificate. I then years later decided that while I loved being a wife and mother, I met my husband, we got married and had three children, three more children together. That while I loved that, it wasn't fulfilling enough for me, and so I started searching for what I was going to do next, and I met people who introduced me to the thought of going to university, even though I you know, hadn't had the best of education from the point of view. I didn't go to like year 12, I went to year 10. Um, so I didn't
But
really
look
think that
at you.
was
But look
possible.
at you now. Let me ask
I
a,
know.
a little question. Was it a closed adoption?
Yes, it
Okay.
was.
So you
Which
never found your sibling
well,
or your child?
well, the good news story is that for I didn't for like almost 30 years. I
Wow.
didn't. But we have we found each other, and we are in each other's lives now. And it's my son, and he's married, and his wife's lovely, and two beautiful boys, and we keep in touch. So they don't live in the same town. We don't live in the same town, but we keep in touch on birthdays, Christmas, special occasions.
You know what? And you did what you had to do. There's no
Yeah,
shame associated that. So any young woman or young man, the young men, they're like the silent partner. Yeah, you're, partying and
yep,
intimacy, and you don't know what happens. My mother got pregnant the first time at 14 years old,
yeah,
and she stayed with my grandmother. She didn't even know what pregnancy was.
no,
So I encourage parents to have that conversation. Sex is the most beautiful thing that God ever created, and the human body. But to teach your children the warning signs of what can happen, and the consequences of their actions. I just found my brother. We did a DNA test, and I
oh,
looked at I looked at my email, and there was this gentleman that had been kept emailing me. I thought he was flirting with me at first.
yep.
And then he says, "I'd like to meet you. I never knew our father." I said, "Our father?" And I looked in there, and I tell you, he was a perfect match. Long story short, he flew here to San Diego to meet me about 2 weeks ago, and he is a welcome addition. He is so wonderful, so
How
smart,
lovely.
and so heady. But it's a coincidence. So I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the decision that you made. I'm proud of the woman that you are today,
Oh, thank
because
you.
there is a lot to say to that. There's a lot of young women that are
Oh,
going through that, and it's very traumatic. And I
it's very
noticed that there's
traumatic.
a lot of counselors or therapists that go through this because it's very therapeutic for them to help others, but this also gives them a gateway to continue to work through their own issues. Is it helpful to you?
I found that when I was studying at university, and I studied for many years because I love learning, and I completed one degree after another, and I just really until I completed my PhD, my doctorate, and I found that when I was working through what I was learning at university, it was very therapeutic because I couldn't help but apply those learnings to my own life and my own situation. And so by the time I'd completed university, which was many, many years, I felt like I'd, you know, been my own therapist for many years, and had worked and sorted a lot of stuff out in my own mind, and came out I think a better person for it, and left a lot of the trauma behind, in all honesty. Yeah,
Exactly. And you
yeah,
look back on it and you go, wow. And then what really kind of annoys you is that it wasn't self induced, it was
no,
inflicted upon me.
yeah, yeah,
But it's a different time. Your parents didn't know what to do.
exactly.
Conversation, there's shame, you know.
Oh, all
How,
that,
how, how do we have this 15, 16-year-old girl walking around with this big belly? Every night, everybody knows what's going on. Were you able to reconcile and forgive your parents for the additional
Yes,
trauma that they put you through?
in time, because I recognize that, like, I try to put myself in their shoes as I became a parent to teenage children myself. I tried to put myself in their shoes and try to imagine what would I do. And much as I really am not in favor of closed adoptions at all, I don't think it's good for anyone. I think that at the time I don't think there was any other option. I don't
Right.
Open adoptions were not even spoken about or known of, really. And I think they did what they thought was the best that they could do for me. And I mean, that's all you can ask any parent to do. So yeah, I've forgiven them. I think they didn't know what to do, and they did the best that they thought they could for me.
Well, they didn't have options because I had a family member, Dr. Ann, that had 28 abortions.
Oh wow, that's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot.
That's,
Yeah.
and when she sat down and told me that, I literally got sick to my stomach.
Mm.
And it was not a time, and I was like, well, you pretty hot. You need
Yeah.
more than birth control. You need a fire extinguisher. Uh, but
Yeah.
it wasn't talked about. What is
Mm.
that option like for women in Australia? Uh, they're actively trying to revolt. They are actively trying to roll back a woman's right to choose here in the United
I
States.
know. I follow.
And
Yeah,
it
I
could
know.
be any given situation that they make that choice, but it's mine. It's my uterus. It's me. I have
Yes.
to deal with my maker. Are they very strict about that in Australia?
No, not as strict as it seems that things are moving towards in America, from what I see. There are still family planning clinics available, and there's still options available for women to access if a termination is what they feel they need to do. And you're right, every woman, there's different situations, different circumstances for everyone, and there's not one size fits all to be making legislation to say that every woman is not allowed to have a termination, or every woman,
And
you know
and the decision is being made by primarily men
absolutely.
who have
Yeah.
never been through this. And I'm telling you, if they had one menstrual,
Yeah.
they'd be a lot more compassionate and understanding, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Sometimes talk therapy is not enough.
True.
uh, Something else that they're doing here in America. They're making psych mushrooms, magic mushrooms,
Psychedelics. Yes.
psychedelics. They're making psychedelics legal.
Hmm.
I've read some articles and they're saying that it is very helpful. It helps release trauma. It helps their clients reframe the situation. Um, but it's going to turn recreational. And I don't
Well,
know how I feel about that. It's hard to go through, I would imagine, talk therapy for 10, 12 years after you've lived a situation for 20 years.
yeah.
But you want a major breakthrough. You can't just go into the dispensary and get you some magic mushrooms and think it's going to be all right. This needs to be facilitated. I also heard that they're still doing shock therapy.
Mm.
Have you heard
Wow.
about that as well?
Yeah. Oh, so that's been a yes. I have heard about both of those. I mean, the shock therapy has been around for many, many years, and it's not used. I don't believe it's used as much, well, in Australia as it used to be, as it was years gone by. Um, and it's always administered by psychiatrists. So yeah, and it has still got, I think, has mixed findings about the effectiveness of that particular, modality. But with psychedelics, I can tell you that in Australia, the Therapeutic Goods Administration um, legalised the use of psychedelics in Australia from the 1st of July this year, but there are a lot of regulations that surround it. And even though they've approved it, it's still not being used because those regulations are still being finalised. And so it has to be applied in really strict supervised environments with a psychiatrist and a psychologist present to administer and monitor. So it's not something that can be just done buy it over the counter, take it home, use it. It has to be used in therapeutic settings with supervision. But the good news is that the early indications of research into the use of psychedelics for the treatment for treating what they're calling treatment resistant depression or treatment resistant PTSD is actually showing really positive signs for those people who've been in therapy for years. And in all honesty, talk therapy is just not cutting it for them. It's just not working.
Right.
So yeah, so
Sometimes they need a boost.
so you kind of hope that it helps those people and gives them some relief. The ones who've been suffering for years and years and years, and with no kind of light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, we all have a tick, okay? We all have a trigger. You can't tell me that you don't. I got stung by a bee, and every time I see a bee,
Yeah, yeah,
it doesn't
true.
have to be these monumental events that can
True.
impact your life,
Yes.
that can turn it from a flicker to a flame. Also, I hear that there is a lot of desire now to do work with ayahuasca and shamans. Now, I know that that's not necessarily your line of work, but
No.
past life regressions and releasing that epigenetics and that generational trauma, it can be unnerving because you realize what happened to you. I don't know. What do you feel about therapy and going that deep, trying to find out what happened in your past to help you figure out what's going to happen in your future or happening to you now? That's some heavy duty work.
It is. It is. I mean, there is evidence of, the way in which intergenerational trauma can be genetically embedded within our nervous systems, and so it does. I think it helps for some people to help them understand why they may be experiencing um, some of the some of the trauma and some of the effects of that intergenerational trauma that they can't make sense out of, and yet it's impacting upon their lives. So I think that's certainly a place for it. But again, I think it needs to be worked through. Someone needs to work through that with a really experienced and very skilled therapist, so that they are not re-traumatized and by learning this new information, and also that they can be supported in an empathetic, caring kind of way to know how to then move forward once they know this information,
Right.
so that it's not going to continue to have a really detrimental effect on their life. Yeah.
I'm liking to ask you all of these different scenarios because you feel like a person that is very empathetic and warm. Your voice tone is very soothing. So
Mm.
these are great questions to ask you. I
I'm
could
real.
sit
I'm
on
really
your
happy.
couch.
I'm really happy to answer these questions. April, I just love working with people. Like from my life experience, and I had and my journey in life, I've met some really, really wonderful people, caring people, supportive people, empathetic people who helped me throughout my life journey to get to where I am in life, to be the person I am, including my parents, and other people along the journey.
They did the best they could with what they had.
Absolutely,
And that's
absolutely.
what they were taught. And that is,
Yeah, yeah.
we can't
And so
blame them.
no, absolutely. And I don't, I've worked through all that. But the reason for saying this is because so I get a lot of um, life satisfaction, enjoyment out of seeing other people achieve in life because I've had people help me on that journey. And I know if I can do the same for someone else, just one other person, then, I feel like I'm a really fortunate person in life.
Well, you are. You made an imprint on society. That's what I say about my podcast. It's not about me. It's totally about you, my guests, and the audience that listen. One more scenario.
Yes.
I've got an upcoming guest that has been just now released, for the lack of a better term, from 30 years of brainwashing from a guru.
Mm,
She has to drive past this house every day when she goes to work, and she knows there's about 30 or 40 other people there. She'll say his name and she'll like bob up and down like a cork. Uh, she talked about how they would make her meditate 3, 4 hours. Now, look, if you get me in a great meditation and I'm there in a trance for like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, that's gold. But daily, 3 and 4 hours. That psychological footprint is hard to erase. Is there hope?
Absolutely. Well, yes, there's hope.
There's always.
Yes, there's always hope. And and now that she's not in that situation, in that environment anymore, if she can find the right person who is a good match for her, and that's the other thing about therapists, it's a bit like you can gain a lot of headway. You can really achieve some goals if you actually are matched up with the right therapist for you. It's like, find the right doctor, find the right dentist, find the right therapist. But if you can find the right one for you, then they can act, and you have that rapport with them, then you can actually you can move forward, and it's dealing with the trauma. It's the same sort of process and understanding of dealing with the trauma of what she's experienced over such a long time, and helping her to relearn how to live her life in a different way that's more um, who she wants to be and what she wants to do.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of women are battered. They are victim of sexual assault by their partner, or they've been violated as a child. What do you say to that woman right now that's struggling, that just is thinking about flipping the switch? How do you keep her encouraged to hang on?
Well, the most important thing is to let them know that there is hope, and that there are services and people available who can assist them and who are there to assist them. So they don't feel like they're all on their own and it's overwhelming, it's too much and too hard. So that's the very first thing, is demonstrating that level of empathy as well, to say, um, so many women go through what you're going through, or have so many women have been through what you're going through, or are still going through. And so this is sadly, it's too common an experience, but there's a way that we can assist you and support you to move out of that environment, that situation. And then you talk about what's available, if they want to hear it, if they're ready to hear it. um,
Exactly, because you've got to be ready to receive it. And the
Absolutely.
breakthrough is not going to be easy. I'm not,
No.
I'm trying to sugarcoat it, because at one
Yeah.
point, maybe more than one point, you're going to have to relive this. You may have to uh, be in contact with your oppressor. I've got one guest that was on my show. Her father-in-law is putting voodoo on her, Dr. Ann. And wait, oh, I'll have to send you the interview. And her mother is still married to this man and knows what's going on. So when you go through this, don't have expectations of others or how they're going to receive it. It's all about you. It's all about your healing, you being able to forgive, you being able to edit and filter, you being able to look at your child and say, look, this is what I've been through. I want you to try to avoid these pitfalls, but also pick yourself up by the bootstraps and march on. Right, Dr. Ann?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it is. It is about putting one foot in front of the other, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time, but knowing that you've got supportive people around you, people who are working with you, people who you can call if you're in a real emergency. But most women on average will leave a domestic violence relationship, like on average 7 times, and go back before they make a decision to finally break free for good, for good. And then and often they go back because there's nowhere else for them to go, or they go back because they've got children and they can't afford, they all the necessities of life, and it's just so hard that they go back and they go back and they go back.
Or they've been brainwashed by their oppressor,
Absolutely.
that you're not good enough, you're nothing without me,
Yeah,
I provide for you. Uh,
absolutely. I
and the
mean,
sexual assault, because as I told someone that I know, it's not intimacy and sex anymore, it becomes rape.
well, and that's all about power. It's not about sex. It's about power. It's about, I have power over you. I can do to you whatever I want to do to you. And the other thing that has been legislated against in the state that I live in Queensland, Australia, and I think in other states of Australia as well, is so strangulation has actually been legislated against and it's been become into the criminal code, because so many, and I'm going to talk about men in particular, because the majority of perpetrators of domestic violence are men, although I do acknowledge that women can perpetrate domestic violence as well, but they're in the minority. So I just wanted to say that the strangulation is such a common aspect of maintaining power and control over a woman. Often
Okay,
it's
wait. Let's be a little graphic here. Are you talking about physical
yes.
strangulation, or are you talking about the insertion of a penis in a woman's
Uh,
throat?
well,
Strangulation as well.
I'm talking about strangulation around the neck. Often it
Wow.
occurs. Often it occurs during the time of being sexually assaulted, being raped, even if it is by a partner, because all of that is really about coercive control, and it's really letting the 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 male know, letting the woman know, I have control over you. I can do whatever I want to you. I can end your life if I choose to. So it's the ultimate. It's the ultimate in holding power over a woman. And it's ultimate in coercive control. Yeah.
You know what someone else told me that I found very fascinating is that abuse perpetrators and abusers of assault also assault animals. There is a pattern that they are abusive to animals, small dogs or cats or whatever, and that's some sort of, I don't know, pattern, indicator, or whatever of abuse that they subject their victim to. I didn't think about that until a girlfriend of mine told me that her husband has socked a chihuahua in the eye. A chihuahua. The dog had a black eye. Needless to say, she had come to work about 2, 3 weeks later with bruises and marks, and she had a black eye too. I don't know what that is. Again, it must be that control, that power, or that cowardliness.
It is about trying to exert power over the other, and to hurt often children and animals. Because that's seen to be the ultimate way to her, hurt the
Right.
woman.
Wow.
If you hurt the family pets, if you hurt the children, then you're hurting her, and she will be easier to control because she wants to protect her children and the animal, pets. And so when I worked in women's services, domestic violence services, we also had to have a access to an emergency service for pets, because sometimes women wouldn't leave if the pets couldn't go with them, because they know the pets would be really abused badly, killed, or horrific things done to the pet. So we had to, if a woman was going to leave a situation, we had to make sure that we had a safe place for her and her children to go to, but we also had to make sure that we could locate a safe place for her to put her pet, so that she would actually say, yes, I'll go now, I'll leave.
And then rebuilding your life can be scary. Starting from the ground up. You've had this
Absolutely.
beautiful house. You've had, lunches with the girls at the country club where you've kept a secret, or you've been self-medicating, trying
Yep.
to subdue the
Oh,
pain. And now
mm.
you look at yourself with a blank canvas. Where do I go? What do I do? Again, it's that one foot in front of the other. I'm sure that you work with programs that help women to find housing, to find jobs, find more than just their self esteem, correct?
Absolutely. And can I tell you that, as horrific as some of what we've been talking about is, and it definitely is, there are some really wonderful success stories that I've seen as well. And it's just such a privilege to be part of those women's lives, to see them move forward in their life. Yes, they've left violent relationships, they've moved on, they've got their own maybe a new home for themselves, their children. The services that can go in and help to set it up, put it completely, furnish it, completely fit it out with everything that woman would need. And so being able to sort of pull all those connections and tap into all those other services to see them get re-established, it just takes a weight off their shoulders, because they don't know how on earth they're ever going to do this for themselves, and it's almost impossible to do on your own. And so it's lovely. And then they go on and they gain employment, and they eventually meet someone, do a lot of work on themselves, and then eventually I've seen women who've met um, have new partners, but partners who are very respectful and who are very considerate of their needs, and it works out well. So I have to say, there's some really lovely stories that I've seen the end of as well.
Absolutely. And now you can make better choices. You see the signs, you understand your boundaries, what you won't tolerate. There's a sense of independence.
That's right. So
and
when I was
self-worth.
working, that's right. And when I was working in the women's services, we ran programs. We ran programs for women to help them identify what it is, why they're attracted to certain um, men, or certain men are attracted to them, who they let into their lives, and what those traits are, and where that comes from. Maybe from having grown up in a family situation where there was domestic violence, and that became the norm. That became what they expected, nothing more for themselves. And when they realised that they can expect more for themselves, it's like a whole new world opens up for them. And that's really lovely to see as well.
And it's language. Listen to what a person says. Look at their behavior. Look at how they treated their mother, or they talk about women. Uh,
Yes.
if you're in a restaurant or where, watch that wandering eye. Use your senses.
Yeah,
Extract your heart at first. You got to use your brain. You got to be smart, because
absolutely.
somebody will say something sweet to you, and oh my goodness, don't let him be a good kisser and a hugger.
That's right.
You
Yeah.
fall in. So, Dr. Ann, I want to ask you also about the unsheltered and homeless population there. It is unbelievable here in the United States. They're living 3 rows deep on the street in tents.
Yeah, it's terrible. And you know what, April, it's really very much the same in Australia. And it's really bad at the moment because there's a combination of things, but it's the cost of living. It's the interest rates have risen dramatically over the last couple of years, and people are just not able to keep up with it, with the payments. And also, you can't rent a place because the vacancy rate is less than 1% in Australia. And
Wow.
so there's just not enough housing stock. There's not enough buildings and apartments and units available to put people into. And so um, there are people living in tents. There are people, like even the town that I live in, there are people who live in tents on the riverbanks because there's nowhere else for them to live. It's just
Wow.
terrible,
I
really
heard
bad.
also that it's largely impacted by the youth too.
A lot of youth are unemployed, but we're finding in Australia that the most rapidly growing cohort of homelessness is in the cohort of women who are aged 55 and above, who are single. Yeah, because they don't have, like, we have superannuation in Australia, and I don't know if you do in the States have
What is it?
superannuation.
What is it?
It's compulsory saving that we get money taken out of our wages that goes into a superannuation fund that we can't touch
Yeah.
until we're of
It,
retirement age.
we call it Social Security. I call it trickery.
Yeah.
If
Well,
I don't lock mine in a year or two, I'll probably never see it.
Well, a lot of these women don't have superannuation because they've, in divorces and relationship breakups, they all that stuff gets split up and divided, and usually women end up with nothing, very little or nothing, and they might have a vehicle, a car that they're sleeping in. Yeah, it's just so sad to see.
Wow,
Yeah,
55 and
yeah,
women.
yeah,
Something to
yeah.
take note of.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. It should never happen. They've raised their families, they've done all the hard work, they've worked all their lives, and that gets to the stage where they're on their own, single and alone, and this is their life, and it's just not right. It's just it's just terrible. Yeah,
Into it. You've done
yeah.
all this great work, but you've also had an opportunity and time to put pen to pad. Tell us a little bit about your books.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, April. Well, I'd love to. So my first book, as I mentioned, it was a memoir, and I felt really compelled to write this, but after about 15 years of thinking about it. So I wrote my memoir because I wanted to demonstrate to other women in particular that even though you have things happen in your life, like as I had in my teenage years, and everyone wants to tell you that, you know, basically you've screwed your life up and there's no hope now, it's all done. That's not the case. You don't have to listen to those messages. You can you can move forward in your life. Just got to find the right people to support you and show you the way. But so my story, I wrote it because I wanted to demonstrate how to anyone who reads it, that if you go through a tough time and people want to tell you all the reasons why you're not going to ever amount to anything in life, you don't need to listen to that. And to demonstrate then how, just through my life experiences, what I then went on to do, and hopefully that can be seen to be as an example of what others can also achieve. Nothing's impossible, really. So that was my memoir, and
So
I
let
also
me see you have it there with you.
I do. I do. So that's this one. I'll see if I can hold it up. Oh,
Oh,
oh, hang
well,
on there.
would you grace us with a reading, a small excerpt from your book?
I would love to, April. This is a just a few sentences, and it relates to the time when I was living with the elderly couple I mentioned earlier, and I was pregnant and a long way from home and feeling a bit alone. And I had decided I was going to prove everyone wrong and complete my schooling. So this was me. I had a small table with a chair set up in the corner of my bedroom where I studied each day. I'd write out all of my assignments by hand, no computers back then, and I emailed them to correspondence school each week. I said email, actually mailed, not email, because there wasn't email back then either. I was really committed to my studies as I was determined to complete grade 10 and get my junior certificate. I probably studied to the level of my ability that my teachers always commented I was capable of, but never really putting my mind to the task. Whereas now I was giving it my all. It is amazing what you can do when you have a clear goal in sight and you're determined to achieve it. This was a good lesson for me to learn. It's a focus I've always since maintained throughout my life, no matter what I strive to achieve.
And that's a good life lesson for anyone and for everyone. It's tenacity, it's resilience, it's never giving up.
Yeah,
You don't know what's around the corner until you turn it. So, bravo,
exactly.
bravo
Yeah,
for you. Tell us
thank
a
you.
little bit about the program that you currently have when it comes to helping people with life mastery.
Yes, well, I have developed I call it my 5 A's to life achievement model. And I developed this myself. And it really is the way that I work with women to help them that assess what their life goals are or what their life goal is to assess and determine what it is I'll just have a look. I've got my book here. I wrote a book about my coaching as well. So I'll just quickly tell you the 5 stages are really assessing what's important to you in terms of what you want to achieve. Um, once you've identified that, then to actually put a plan and steps in place, and then affirm again for yourself that that really is the goal that you want to achieve, and you've got your plan now how to move forward to achieve it. The next step is to actually take action and put that plan into process, get it underway. And of course, like any plan that you put in place, you have to review it and you have to appraise it. So the next step is to appraise your progress, see if you're on track, see if you need to make any adjustments, any changes to that goal that you're striving to achieve, and how you're going to get there. You make those changes if there are some that need to be made, and then you continue to move forward. And you keep doing that as many times as you need to until you accomplish the goal that you set out to achieve. So so, with consistency and application and diligence are the ways to creating individual success. So, that's the model that I have developed and that I use to work with the women who I coach in their life. And their goals can be anything.
Well, I wrote it down. I took notes. Assessing, planning,
Yes,
affirming, taking
yes,
action, and review your
yeah,
plan.
yeah,
Can I add one more?
yeah.
Dream. Dream the impossible dream. Be
Oh,
a manifester. Ask the universe, God, spirit, source, as we call it, Gus.
yeah,
what
yeah,
what is your objectives? Do you even know? Sometimes it's hard. You know, when you were in grade 10, I was in grade 11. What are you going to do when you get out of high school? The pressure is put on you. I don't know. I want to lay up like lunch meat. I don't want to do nothing. But the pressure is on you to go to university, get a trade, get married, have children, yada, yada. These
yeah.
are expectations of other individuals. Dial
True.
back, take a breath. Again, you have a blank canvas. Paint a masterpiece. What is it that you truly want? Do you want
Yeah,
to be an artist? Do you want to be a chef? Do you want to be a gardener? Do you want to work in the field of psychology and trauma recovery to help
yeah,
other individuals? Dream the impossible dream. And I'll tell you, you that and all of these practical applications that Dr. Ann has outlined in her books, I don't see any other way but success for you. Thank you so much for being here with me and my guests. You are such a gift to the world, and I'm so glad that you're here. Please tell my brains how to get in contact with you, how to work with you, and how to purchase a copy of the books.
Yeah, thank you, April. It's been an absolute pleasure to be interviewed by you, to be part of this podcast. So thank you so much. So to get in touch with me, my website is just drannbutcher.com. It's really nice and easy. It's when I say doctor, it's just drannbutcher.com.
Let me add a question to that. Is it .au at the end of that?
No, it's not. It's
Okay,
just
perfect.
drannbutcher.com. Yeah,
Perfect.
I tried to make it nice and easy and short. Yeah. The other way to get in touch with me is through Facebook. My Facebook page is just called Dr. Ann Butcher. You can make contact with me through Messenger on Facebook or my website. My email address is on my website as well, so you can track me down that way. But I would love to, very open to hear from anyone who's watching this who might have a question or an idea, suggestion, or be interested in talking to me about, life coaching or working with them in any way. I'm very open to that.
Try a different perspective. You may be a different ethnicity, you may be a different age, you may be a citizen of a different country. Get a different perspective from someone that is impartial, that has no judgment, that doesn't even know you.
Yes,
Again, it's fresh, it's new, it opens up ideas.
yes.
Speaking of ideas, I did see one thing on your page that I had to share that intrigued me. I kind of wanted to add this in before we close. Your parliament now is considering adding Indigenous tribal people to the parliament. Tell us a little bit about that. That's very fascinating.
It is very fascinating, April. But so yesterday was the day of the referendum in Australia. So there's been a referendum. Um, so I'll backtrack a little bit for listeners to give a little bit of the context to this. So back in 2017, there was a big constitutional referendum held in the centre of Australia around where Ayers Rock or Uluru is in
Right.
Australia. With the traditional owners and many traditional owners from many of the different lands in Australia, tribal lands in Australia. They came together and they put together a request to the government, basically, to give the Indigenous people of Australia a voice to Parliament and to enshrine that voice in the Australian Constitution. Now, what they wanted was a voice to be. They wanted to be recognised as the traditional owners of Australia, because
Mm.
in our legislation, Australia was said to be a land of terra nullius, which is a land that was meant to be unpopulated before white colonisation. Now, we all know that that is not correct. So they wanted to put that straight and have that in the Constitution, that Indigenous peoples of this land were the first ones here before white colonisation, which is only fair, which is only right.
Which
That
is
was
only
one
the
part of it,
truth.
which is only the truth, exactly. And the second part was then they wanted to, because the statistics for Indigenous people in Australia in terms of life outcomes and life expectancy are particularly bad, very bad. In terms of life expectancy is a lot less than the non-Indigenous population. And in every one of the social indicators that you can imagine, child protection, incarceration, health, employment, like everything, the statistics are really um, way below the average for the non-Indigenous populations. So they wanted a voice to government to advise them on ways in which these serious social issues can be addressed, um, by putting forward their own solutions to these problems to the government for the government's consideration, not for the government to actually be compelled to act against, just for consideration. So they called it the voice. They wanted to have a voice. And there was a referendum in Australia held yesterday, which I'm really sad to say was overwhelmingly defeated. So, unfortunately, that is not going to happen. And for those who voted yes, who wanted that to happen, of which I'm one, of whom I'm one, it's a very sad day today because it didn't actually eventuate. So, I guess it's now time for the government to think about how they're going to listen to the voices of Indigenous
You
people.
know what? And when you are the chosen sacrificial lamb, to whom much is given, much is required. So have hope. From my reading
I,
and understanding, the indigenous people are some of the first people that inhabited the planet, not just Australia,
well, it's the oldest civilization in the world.
in the world.
65,000 years. Yeah,
So
65,000 years.
again, they, I don't know, maybe they'll do like the indigenous people did here in California and open up casinos. That's what they've done. The casino market is run by the tribal nations, and I'm telling you, they are making a killing. You know, they've
Yep.
got a run on Vegas. If they are able to be self-sustained, you know, it's hard
Yes.
because they want to keep their culture. They have to keep their culture,
The
their
culture.
history. They want to bring up their children. But what happens again is they've been so suppressed. I know it broke my heart when I came to Australia and I saw Indigenous people with their didgeridoo dancing, painted on the pier like a carnival act. I
Yeah.
didn't want to see that. I wanted
No.
to see them in their natural habitat among their people. But it's just a different time, and that's the same thing for Black Americans here. We're in an upheaval. It's just the entire world. But I can say one thing about Australia. I find that it is like a portal. You're very spiritual there. So don't take that for granted, people. That is embedded in you. It's like we're going through this vortex. We're trying to get to 5G. We're all having to go through this space. And for some reason, I'm thinking that Australia has a lot to do with it. So do not take that lightly. And what you represent, and the blessings, and the beauty, and the wisdom, and the culture of the people that are there. They're not there to hurt you, intimidate you, disrespect you. They actually want to embrace you and help you get through this channel, this thing that we call life. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Dr. Ann. You are the business.
Thank you so much, April. I've really enjoyed talking with you, and thank you so much for having me as a guest on your podcast.
You're
I can't
welcome.
thank you
You're
enough.
welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Brains, we love you all over the cotton picking world. Don't be selfish. Don't be greedy. Don't be mean. Don't traumatize anybody. And if you've experienced any of that, reach out and get some help. Go right here, like, love, share, and subscribe. Like, love, share, and subscribe to On the Edge. We give you what you need. Leave a comment. If you think what we're saying is hokey, tell us that too, so that we can sharpen our knife and be at the top of our game. Right on point. Thank you so much, Brains. Have an amazing day. We love you.